Let's jump right into this explainer. We're looking at a deeply dramatic, totally hypothetical decapitation strike on Iran's leadership, exactly as it's mapped out in our source material. This scenario, which Israel dubbed Operation Roaring Lion and the US called Epic Fury, well, it outlines a terrifyingly precise, overwhelming military maneuver. We're going to break down exactly how this hypothetical 2026 operation unfolds, piece by piece, so you can really get a grip on the tactical execution and the absolutely massive geopolitical shockwaves it creates. Just look at how incredibly fast this whole thing unfolds. At 6 a.m., Israeli jets take off. Then, a mere 2 hours and 5 minutes later, the climax of this entire operation strikes a government compound right in the heart of Tehran. Boom! It's 9:40 a.m. local time when the missiles actually make impact. Some drawn-out, weeks-long siege. It's a lightning-fast, highly targeted blow designed to end the conflict almost before it even gets off the ground. So what's the immediate result of that morning strike? 30. That is the staggering number of senior Iranian officials killed in literally just the first 30 seconds of the attack. Think about that. 30 top-tier leaders just wiped out in the blink of an eye. This breakdown right here shows you the sheer scale of that immediate decapitation of Iran's military and spiritual leadership. We're talking Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, and the head of the National Defense Council, all neutralized in the initial blast. But, and this is a really crucial detail, Iran's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, actually survived the strike. And honestly, that completely scrambles the resulting power vacuum. Section 1. Decades of rising tensions, the historical context. Now, what's super fascinating here is that a massive strike in 2026 wouldn't just happen out of nowhere, right? Let's step back a second and look at the actual history that built up to this ultimate flashpoint. We can really trace the core of this animosity all the way back to the 1979 Islamic Revolution, which, as you know, overthrew the US-backed Shah. The timeline then pivots to the rise of Khamenei in 1989 before hitting a huge escalation point in 2002. That's when secret uranium enrichment facilities were uncovered in Iran. And wow, that discovery set off global alarm bells, triggering decades of heavy sanctions, relentless cyber attacks, and a deeply entrenched shadow war between these nations. Our source material also really highlights the stark contrast in U.S. diplomatic approaches during this time. On one hand, you have the Obama administration's landmark 2015 nuclear deal, which aimed to basically halt Iran's bomb capabilities through diplomacy. But then, literally just 3 years later, the Trump administration executes a total withdrawal, famously labeling it a horrible, one-sided deal. That kind of intense diplomatic whiplash, it dramatically ratcheted the tension right back up. And that brings us right to the edge of the cliff. The pressure cooker finally explodes in 2025. Iran's economy completely crashes, leading to massive nationwide protests. In response to stalled negotiations, the US and Israel actually launched an initial wave of bunker buster strikes, specifically targeting 3 nuclear sites. Inside Iran, the regime cracks down hard. They shut off the internet, and the fallout is brutal. Thousands killed and 50,000 arrested. The stage for an all-out war was officially set. Section 2. Waves of attack. The tactical operation. So the really critical thing to grasp here is exactly how the US and Israel executed this overwhelming, multi-layered assault the following year. I mean, how do you even pull off a military operation of this absolute magnitude? Let's look at the execution phase and see how this all stacks up. Step 1 is that highly targeted decapitation strike in Tehran that we just talked about. Step 2, they immediately moved to neutralize Iran's air defenses to totally clear the skies. Step 3, Israel deploys a massive fleet of 200 jets to systematically wipe out missile stockpiles. And finally, Step 4, the U.S. military formally joins the fray, launching Tomahawk cruise missiles from warships and firing ground artillery. It is just a relentless, synchronized wave of suppression. Now, to actually pull off that first step, the intelligence gathering had to be incredibly precise. The CIA tracked the Ayatollah for months. They had mapped his exact movements so well that Allied forces audaciously shifted the operation from a planned night attack to a highly daring daytime strike. Why? Simply because a morning meeting of top officials at that compound was, quote, an opportunity too good to miss.
إنا لله إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون.
And you know, the psychological warfare was just as coordinated as the airstrikes. Right after the impact, both Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu released synchronized messages aimed directly at the Iranian public. The message was blunt. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. They were actively trying to turn all that massive 2025 civilian unrest into a full-blown revolution right amidst the chaos of the strike. Of course, no operation of this immense scale happens without horrific collateral damage. The source reports that an errant airstrike targeting an adjacent naval base tragically hit the Sar-Chebay Elementary Girls' School. State media claimed 175 people, mostly children, were killed. This massive, heartbreaking loss of civilian life immediately triggered a formal investigation by U.S. Central Command. It really highlights the devastating human cost behind all this tactical precision. Section 3, Retaliation and Chaos. Operation True Promise 4. As you might expect, Iran didn't just fold. They immediately vowed continuity of governance and launched a massive counteroffensive, dubbed Operation True Promise 4, which basically threw the entire Middle East into absolute chaos. This number really tells the immediate story here. 200. That is the number of retaliatory missiles Iran fired directly at Israel alone. But here's the thing. The retaliation wasn't contained to just Israel. Not even close. The sheer geographical spread of Iran's response was, frankly, massive. They started hitting critical infrastructure and U.S. bases across the entire Arabian Peninsula. We are talking Dubai Airport and luxury hotels in the UAE, the U.S. Navy Fifth Fleet headquarters over in Bahrain, 66 ballistic missiles launched directly at Qatar, and the Prince Sultan Air Base targeted in Saudi Arabia. It was a rapid, furious, and highly dispersed counterattack. And the fallout extended way further than that. The Houthis in Yemen ended a ceasefire and just resumed attacking Red Sea shipping lanes. Drones and missiles started raining down over Iraq and Jordan. Kuwait's airport terminals got struck. And perhaps most alarmingly, NATO missile defense systems across Europe were suddenly placed on high alert due to fears of sleeper cell activations and a much wider global conflict. Section 4. A War of Choice, the Legal and Global Fallout. As the dust settles on that initial exchange, our explainer shifts gears from the military theater to the deep, complex international debate regarding the actual legality and the global fallout of this pre-dawn strike. This right here is the fundamental question that international law experts and global leaders are completely grappling with as they analyze the justifications for the attack. Was this a war of necessity or a war of choice? To understand why this distinction matters so much, let's clearly define these two terms. A war of necessity means you are striking preemptively because an attack on you is imminent and direct, like you have to strike to survive. A war of choice, however, means striking an adversary simply because they happen to be temporarily weak. It's an optional preventative measure just to ensure they don't become a bigger threat down the line. And international law, it strongly condemns the latter. And here is where we see the core friction in the source material. The official claim was that President Trump argued the strike was an absolute necessity, eliminating imminent threats that directly endanger the U.S. and its allies. But then you have the reality check. The U.S.'s own intelligence suggested Iran was still years away from a nuclear weapon, and their current ballistic missiles maxed out at a 3,000-kilometer range, which means they were capable of hitting neighbors, sure, but not directly reaching the United States. Because of this intense debate, geopolitical shockwaves really cascaded globally. Fierce constitutional debates erupted back in the US because the strike completely lacked congressional approval. Widespread protests broke out all over the world against the conflict. And economically, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz caused oil prices to just skyrocket, threatening a severe impending global energy crisis. But underneath all the politics and all the economics is the very real human toll. 555. That is the reported number of people killed in Iran according to the Red Crescent in the immediate aftermath. And that's just adding to the already growing casualty lists in Israel, the UAE, Lebanon, and among U.S. troops stationed in the region. Now, bringing you resource-intensive analysis like the explainer we've just gone through takes immense precision, and our source notes that this work is supported by Henson Shaving. Just like complex military operations rely on exact calculations, Henson approached razor burn with aerospace engineering. The razor holds the blade at a perfectly precise 30-degree angle, extending just 0.0013 inches past the shave plane. That's literally less than the thickness of a human hair. This rigid support dramatically reduces blade flex, which gives you a perfectly controlled, significantly smoother and less irritating shave. All right, I'll leave you with this final, pretty provocative thought to ponder regarding the terrifying precedent a hypothetical scenario like this sets. If every nation decided to preemptively strike their adversaries just because they appeared temporarily weak under the guise of prevention, we'll find ourselves living in a world of constant, unrelenting war. It is absolutely a critical question for the future of global stability. Thanks for diving into this explainer with me.
Click the subscribe button. Then, click the bell icon and select all to get every notification.